Okay, when I first got the Tone Master Super Reverb, I made a video about it with pedals and I said I wasn't sure that it was doing that well with fuzz pedals. So it's taken me a bit of time and I haven't actually played this amp in a while. I came back to it over the last day or two and I've got to say this amp still blows my mind, still an incredibly attractive proposition for the price, for the weight of it and for the accessibility of it compared to finding a vintage Super Reverb or even other reissue Super Reverbs. This feels and plays so much like a real amp. It's mind-blowing and I really love it. What I've done today is I've decided to compare it in the way it works with fuzz with another Fender amp that is a tube amp. But I didn't want to, I didn't want to use any of my 2-rocks or more expensive boutique amps. I wanted to give this a fair chance. And so I'm comparing it to my 68 reissue Vibrolux. Now, they're not comparable amps in many ways, but at the same time, they sort of are. They've both got 10-inch speakers as opposed to 12-inch. And although one is a black panel and one is a silver panel, the 68 Vibrolux has this custom mode, which is a slightly more modern sounding thing. They both sound like Fender amps. And so I think it's quite an interesting thing to compare. On the whole, they fall within the same sort of narrow category of amps. Now what we're going to do today is we're going to compare at 2 different volumes. My thoughts here were that at lower volumes on an amp anyway, fuzzes do suffer because they need a little bit of overdrive in the amp to really work their best. But we're going to work through a load of clips here from lower volume clean, and then with fuzz, and then with another pedal after the fuzz, which is going to be the brown carbon. And that is, we're using it in the sense like a clean boost. The volume's up a bit, but the gain is down a lot. I want to see what happens when you put the fuzz through a sort of boost pedal. Does that help it into the amp? And then we're going to do the same thing but at higher volume where the amps are already breaking up. So I found a volume on both is around 4.5. This is before it starts to break up. It's clean, but it's not too clean and it's playable. So let's just jump straight in, and in each case we'll start with the Vibrolux so you can kind of get your ears attuned, and let's just hear what they sound like clean on 4.5 volume. Okay, so both amps I think actually sound really good. I hadn't played this Vibrolux for months and months and months, and I've come back to it and realised actually for the money as well, it is a really superb amp. It's got a lot of interesting character to it, especially in the normal sort of or vintage channel. This is the custom channel, which is supposed to be better with pedals. I thought this would be a better channel to put this in. So now, I wasn't sure and I didn't come to this video with preconceptions. How are these both going to sound with fuzzes when they're completely clean? Let's find out now. We're using the silktone fuzz. The fuzz is more than 3/4 of the way up. The volume's up to a decent level, but I'm not using the cleanup knob. And I've set the bias on this, which you can be very specific to, halfway between what they call a vintage fuzz and the sweet tone, which is a slightly more modern sounding, fuller fuzz. I've set it halfway between there. Let's see what it sounds like. Now, this was actually pretty close, and it's quite hard to tell, you know, which I would prefer and what sounds better. They both sound like different amps. You know, the Super Reverb is so obviously scooped and also bigger sounding, and the Vibrolux has a slightly smoother sound to it, a little bit less scooping. You can't control the mids either. But as it pertains to the Fuzz, although they sound different from each other, they both worked pretty similarly. And that is to say that when the amp is not overdriving, you get a lot less dynamic range out of your fuzz pedal. You can't really roll back that much because in a lot of ways you lose any dynamics that you've got. It's quite hard to play in some ways. You know, there's very little sustain, there's not much going there for you. So whilst you could use it for some sort of effects and things, for general playing, it can get a little bit sort of stiff. But on the other hand, the way I thought the Super Reverb played compared to when I first ever tried it, actually, I've come to realize for the category of amps and the price of the amps and everything like that, it's not that much different from this Vibrolux. You know, at this volume, it's not ideal for fuzzes, but it isn't for either of the amps. So it's not just that it's a Tone Master. It can get a little bit fizzy. It can get a little bit, you know, it sort of almost sounds like a broken speaker sometimes. But in a way, that is what fuzz was made for. So it's not ideal, that's for sure, and generally I'd want to have my amp running hotter, but that is just the same for both, whether it's got valves or it's a digital modeling amp. Now, there are some times when I'd hit a note and the Super Reverb wouldn't react the way that I expected. Now, that might be the fuzz pedal saying, I don't know what to do here, because there's no tubes for me to hit, or whatever. Scientifically, I have no idea what's really going on, but just in terms of playing, for the most part, they're similar. Now, if I was a complete fuzz purist fuzz hound, which I'm growing to be, unfortunately, for my wallet, I might say that it's just not quite good enough. And if fuzz is all you're interested in and it's really such an important part of your rig, then possibly you wouldn't want to go for the Tone Master. On the other hand, let's hear it with a pedal afterwards now and sort of see what happens when you put a pedal after. Does that help to lift the whole thing and get more dynamics out of that fuzz pedal? in this case, by putting a pedal afterwards, it's adding in some ways and taking away in others. What it's adding is a little bit more oomph, a little bit more dynamic range there. So you've got more to play with. You can roll back on the guitar a little bit more. But what it's taking away is the character, because you get a lot more smoothness and sustain, which may not be what you're after. That carbon pedal and probably other sort of cleanish boosts are going to smooth out that fuzz as it, because it's after the fuzz, so it's affecting the fuzz. It does smooth it out and make it sound different. Now, it might be that you like the way it sounds, it might be that you don't like the way it sounds. It can do something, and that is to give you a little bit more into the amp, a little bit more rollback that you can do, but ultimately then it doesn't sound so much like a vintage fuzz, it sounds a bit more modern. So it may not be the best way to go. What I haven't done today is used any other fuzz pedals or any other types of pedals. I wanted to keep this simple. So obviously the next thing I would do is turn the volume up on the amps. Let's hear them clean first just to see what they sound like. Now, first of all, it's no surprise that people say that Fender amps come to life at around 6 to 7 on the volume. At 6.5, they're so much fun to play. They're not too overdriven, not too wallowy. I mean, neither of these are perfect amps. The Vibrolux, certainly as valve amps go, is a little bit temperamental. It's quite wallowy. I could have turned the bass down more, but then it loses quite a lot of its character. So, it's not a perfect amp. It's a very characterful amp though, and I can sit and play with that huge reverb and the bouncy character that it has. I can sit and play that for hours. Now the Super Reverb at that volume really starts to become that super reverb that I imagine anyway. It's full of life. It makes you play with quite a lot of energy. I just love it. So I was hoping at this point the fuzzes will really give me a lot more dynamic range, a lot more rollback. So let's find out. So to me, it felt so much better to play when it was at that volume. Obviously, there's more air being moved generally, so it's a lot more fun to play anyway. But the fuzzes themselves sounded better. There was more life to them, but you could roll them back a lot more as well without losing any presence, without losing all your top end. And so you start to get that full fuzz feeling that you want. Now, the Vibrolux has quite a different character. It's quite a lot flatter than the Super Reverb, and so the fuzz sounds a bit more modern in that one. I think with the Super Reverb, that vintage character really comes through, and it doesn't sound like just any other amp. It sounds like a Super Reverb, and that's one of the best things I found with this Tone Master, is how distinct that character is. And it's no different when you play with a fuzz. It reminds me of some of the other amps that I've got, which have very definite characters, and the fuzzes don't just take over, they work with that character to just enhance what you've got. And you can be as sensitive as you want with the volume knob, with your fingers, with your pick, whatever, and you'll still get a lot out of it. So yeah, it definitely helps on both amps to play at higher volume. At this point, I would be safe in saying that the Tone Master isn't bad playing with this fuzz. Now, I can't test every fuzz pedal. Over time, off camera, I've played with a few different fuzzes that I've got. It can be hit and miss based on the pedal, how much fuzz you actually put through the pedal, what else you're interacting with, but no more than any other sort of valve amps. I mean, the boutique, very high-end valve amps that I use sometimes are just better with pedals generally. They are. And in some cases, you actually lose a bit of character, though, that way. They work so well. You don't get a lot of the sort of edges and the odd characters that you might get with the Vibrolux and a Super Reverb like this. But yeah, they're more consistent and you know what you're getting. So at this price point, I don't think the Super Reverb Tone Master is behaving badly. You know, it's very, very good, as is the Vibrolux. In terms of what these amps should do, which is give you inspiration, project your sound, get you through in a mix. You know, these amps can do all of that. And so, yeah, I'd be happy to use this Tone Master with fuzz pedals. Lastly, we want to hear it with the carbon pedal again, just see what it's doing at this volume. Well, you know what? It works really well with the carbon pedal. I think this would be a sort of artistic decision as to whether you want to use a pedal like that or not. Again, it slightly flattens out and rolls off the top end, but at the same time it gives you even more dynamic range, and at some points it can sound more like an overdrive with a sort of fuzzy edge as opposed to a full-on fuzz, which you might want, but as you roll back you've got more space to roll back. So it's just quite interesting running a fuzz into a boost pedal like that. Quite enjoyable. I'd still prefer just to play with the fuzz personally. I feel like you get the rawest fuzz character from that. So anyway, that's it for today. I just wanted to get this video out there because I promised it a few months ago. And all I can say in the end is the Tone Master, for its price point, behaves as well as, if not slightly differently than other amps in that price bracket. If anything, I think the Super Reverb punches above its weight. You get so much. And although I've had to use high volume, at least with the Super Reverb, you've got an attenuator built in, and I know for the first 2 to 3 notches rolling back, the amp still acts brilliantly. You still get a decent feeling of air being pushed through, but it's nowhere near as loud as that. So at least for smaller gigs, you can definitely use this sort of Super Reverb with fuzz. As to whether you can do that at home or not, it depends how much you're addicted to that feeling of air coming through. But if you play at home and you're worried about volume, that's the thing. We're all, we're all trying to find that magic bullet. The one thing with the carbon is you can actually then use that to lower the volume a little bit as well. Gives you a bit more flexibility. So anyway, I hope this has been useful. In the next couple of days, I've got a really exciting new amp coming in. I hope it's going to be a major part of the channel. It's one lots of people have asked me to look at, and that will be a Bartel amp. So in the next video, you're going to see which Bartel amp I've gone for. If you don't know what Bartel amps are, I'll explain it all. But safe to say, it's going to be compared to the Two Rocks, the Rift amp, my Matchless, and to Tone King amps for a very specific reason, which if you don't know about, I'll explain. But yeah, have a good day. Cheers.